Zathura is full of memes, which is why I made a supercut of the movie that's the second most viewed video on my channel, even though that video only took me 30 minutes to edit. Thanks, YouTube. Not like I spend 20 hours a week on my other videos or anything. Let's see if this game is at least as meme-worthy as the movie, or if I'll regret ever playing a game that's a clear ripoff of Jumanji. But in space! The game opens up with Walter forcing Danny down into the scary basement because they get into a fight. Walter! Danny ends up finding the Zathura board game and brings it back upstairs to play with them.
Hey, what's this?
The cutscenes have an uncanny valley feeling to them since the characters look weird and the script is similar but not quite the same as the movie, so everything just felt a little off. And who designed this camera? It's inverted on the x-axis, so moving it around feels backwards. There's not even an option to change it in the menu for some reason. Why are Walter and Danny wearing backpacks from the start of the game? Eventually, Walter and Danny start playing the game, where Walter gets a robot who kidnaps you and takes you back to his spaceship. After getting kidnapped, you first play as Danny, who has a slingshot that lets you shoot things from a distance. You can also find special types of ammo for it, which are more effective than the standard ammo. The game's controls and camera just feel terrible. Even doing simple things like jumping onto platforms can be frustrating because of how bad the clunky controls are.
Nope.
There's not even a shadow under the character to show you where you're landing, so combine those horrible controls with a terrible camera and you get a depth perception nightmare.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
The levels consist of horribly controlling platforming sections and boring combat sections, where you spam the same move over and over and have to rely on the lock-on targeting to hit anything. You might think there's more to this game, but that's really all there is, apart from a few one-off equally as bad mini-games. Eventually you get to play as Walter, who controls just as bad as Danny, but instead of a slingshot, you get a wrench that can be used to deflect projectiles. There's not really a strategy with it, since spamming the light attack works just fine, so you end up button mashing during combat just like Danny. You also get throwable balls, I guess, which are good for attacking ranged enemies. It's the exact same as Danny's slingshot, except you get a limited number of them. At the end of the first location, you get to play as Walter's robot. The robot controls just as poorly, but is a bit more fun due to the more actiony levels crammed with enemies. He can shoot a rapid-fire laser gun and has two nearly useless melee moves.
Why you mad?
Since why would you use the melee attacks when you can spam the laser gun from a distance? At the end of every location, there's a boss fight.
Alright you guys, so I literally just fucking shit upon myself.
The boss fight to the robot spaceship looks cool, but is super repetitive and the boss has way too much health. You end up spamming the laser gun while strafing left and right to dodge everything, then when he picks you up, you spam circle. That's the whole fight. The next location you go to is this lava-themed planet that's way more open looking, which I liked, but it is still linear. At this point I found it more successful to just run past the enemies to try and make it to the next checkpoint. That way I didn't have to fight the camera while doing repetitive, boring combat. Part of the reason I chose to run past the enemies is because of the terrible lock-on aiming mechanic. Whenever you lock onto something, it seems fairly random as to which enemy will get locked onto. And there's no way to change the target, so you have to keep spamming the lock-on, hoping it locks onto the target you actually want. After making your way through the planet, Danny eventually fights this big lava boss, which is just as bad as the first robot boss. So you're fighting the boss, and then it picks up Danny and swallows him, so you're like, okay, guess he's dead, but then he does this. The next location you go to is this Zorgon lizard alien spaceship, where you have to rescue a stranded astronaut. The level plays out exactly the same as the first spaceship level, except they added lizard Zorgons as enemies. After doing the same repetitive levels, you eventually meet up with the stranded astronaut who takes you back to your house, where Danny gets sucked out into space so you have to rescue him, so here we go again. Run past the enemies, do some crappy platforming, then fight the boss. This boss fight, however, was my favorite one in the game and one of the few things I actually enjoyed. Each of his arms have a different attack, and you deflect his shots back at him, so you have to learn his attacks and then fight him accordingly. Go back to your house again, then you have to go to the Zordon mothership because your game got stolen, so you have to get it back, but first you play as the robot on the moon for some reason. The game never really explains why you're playing as a specific character, it just decides for you. The moon mission was pretty fun though because of the reduced gravity, but it all looked the same, so it was pretty easy to get turned around. Once you're actually on the Zordon mothership, you do the same run past the enemies routine, making your way through the ship. This level was one of the most frustrating. Like, what was I doing wrong here?
I'm legally blind.
There's so many frustrating moments that don't feel like your fault. The final boss is the worst one in the game, which I guess is a fitting end to all of this. It's really unclear how you actually kill him. At first I just thought he had a ton of health because hitting him over and over didn't kill him, but you actually have to wait till he drops down from the ceiling and then try to shove him out the window 3 separate times before it actually works.
Let me drive the boat.
You're coming with me.
After the boss fight, you go back home, finish the game, your house gets sucked into a black hole which somehow returns them back to their real home that's not in outer space, and that's the whole game. There really isn't a lot to talk about here. 99% of the game's difficulty comes from the horrible controls and bad camera. Probably half my deaths were because the game has no depth perception.
Come on, man.
There's no progression apart from the first level when you get to experiment with each character for the first time. Walter and Danny are the exact same character except Walter is melee and Danny is ranged. The only somewhat unique character is the robot, but the combat feels the same with him except you have to button mash faster since there's more enemies. You'd think the game would do something to add some variety, but it just changes location, then has you do the exact same thing but with a few new enemies that you can run past, and then a boss fight. The only redeeming quality about this game are the strangely hilarious cutscenes that are barely tied to the movie.
Told you he'd come back, just like a good dog. I told you.
He is one bad dude. Goodest bad dude ever.
I wanted to stop so many times because of how unfair and frustrating the game felt. The only reason I wasted 5 hours of my life was for this video, so I hope you at least got some entertainment out of it. And let me know in the comments if there are any other trash games I need to make a video on. If you want to watch more of me complaining, I'll have my Bad Games playlist linked in the description. Thanks for watching and don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos like this in the future.